I remember adjusting the collar of my modest but impeccably tailored suit one final time before stepping out of my 10-year-old, reliable but decidedly unremarkable Honda Civic. The car, polished to a gleam, still looked utterly out of place among the gleaming BMWs, sleek Mercedes, and exotic Porsches lining the circular, cobblestone driveway of the Montgomery estate. Tonight marked a pivotal moment. My first formal dinner with my fiancée, Sophia's family, particularly her formidable father, Richard Montgomery. The weight of expectation, not unlike the pressure of a strategic combat mission, pressed against my chest, a phantom body armor I hadn't worn in years, but whose phantom presence still felt acutely real. I'm Chris Vance, 32 years old. For the past 6 years, my life has been defined by a quiet, almost reclusive ambition, a stark contrast to the thunderous roar of my previous existence. I served 2 grueling tours as a Special Forces medic in Afghanistan, collecting scars both visible and unseen, etched onto my soul and skin, and a substantial sum of combat pay that I meticulously saved, every single dollar accounted for, every risk calculated. When I returned home, instead of succumbing to the temptation of a shiny new sports car, or a sprawling suburban house, or lavish vacations that many of my peers pursued with unbridled abandon, I invested every penny, not in the volatile, unpredictable currents of the stock market, which felt too abstract, too detached from tangible reality, but directly into promising tech startups and burgeoning biomedical ventures. I immersed myself in the world of venture capital and emerging technologies. I studied relentlessly, devoured every financial report, every market analysis. I networked tirelessly with brilliant minds in Silicon Valley, and I took calculated, high-stakes risks that often made seasoned investors raise an eyebrow. Most people, seeing my quiet demeanor, my sensible clothing, and my older car, assumed I was simply a quiet veteran working as a freelance consultant for a small medical supplies company. They didn't see the silent, strategic empire I was diligently building, brick by digital brick, bite by bite, a fortress of financial independence. It was a carefully guarded secret, a private testament to my own resilience, my foresight, and my unwavering belief in the power of calculated risk. I had met Sophia 6 months earlier at a small, unassuming charity gala for wounded veterans. I had attended reluctantly, pushed by a well-meaning former commanding officer. She was volunteering, her vibrant presence, a stark contrast to the subdued elegance of the room, like a burst of sunlight in a muted painting. What struck me wasn't just her undeniable beauty, the way her auburn hair caught the soft ambient light, or how her intelligent, empathetic green eyes sparkled when she laughed, but her genuine, almost profound interest in the stories veterans shared. She listened without the polite, often awkward detachment I'd grown accustomed to from civilians, truly hearing the nuances of pain and triumph, seeing the person behind the uniform, the soul behind the scars. When I cautiously mentioned my struggles with PTSD after 3 grueling tours in Afghanistan, the nights plagued by nightmares, the sudden debilitating flashes of memory, she didn't offer empty platitudes or forced sympathy. Instead, she asked thoughtful, piercing questions, remembered minute details from our conversations weeks later, and offered a quiet, understanding presence that felt like a soothing balm to my long-wounded soul, a comfort I hadn't realized I so desperately craved. Our courtship had been a whirlwind of quiet coffee dates in obscure cafes, long, reflective walks through the verdant paths of Central Park, and intimate evenings where, for the first time since returning stateside, I felt truly seen, truly understood, truly accepted. Sophia worked as a dedicated pediatric nurse, her boundless compassion extending far beyond the sterile hospital walls, encompassing every living creature. She was everything her family, particularly her father, was not: grounded, empathetic, and utterly devoid of pretense, a refreshing gust of honest wind in a world often choked by artifice. Richard Montgomery, Sophia's father, was a veritable titan in the commercial real estate world, a man whose formidable reputation for ruthlessness, sharp-edged negotiations, and a singular focus on profit preceded him like a dark cloud. He was a self-made millionaire, a fact he frequently, almost obsessively, reminded anyone within earshot, as if it were a mantra of his own superiority. His face was etched with the deep, unforgiving lines of relentless ambition and countless sleepless nights, his eyes sharp and calculating, always assessing, always judging, always seeking an advantage. He exuded an almost palpable aura of immense power and vast wealth, a subtle, pervasive arrogance that made lesser men shrink in his presence, their shoulders hunching, their voices lowering. Sophia had warned me with a tender, anxious touch of her hand on my arm. Dad can be intense, Chris. He values success above all else, especially financial success. It's almost an obsession. And he's very, very protective of his image, his family, and what he perceives as their worth. Just be yourself. He'll come around. Eventually, her words, meant to reassure, only fueled a quiet unease in my stomach, a persistent gnawing knot. Being myself meant revealing a life that didn't fit his narrow, rigidly defined definition of success, a definition that seemed to have no room for quiet dignity or hard-won wisdom. As I walked up the grand, imposing steps of the mansion, its opulent facade gleaming under the precisely placed evening lights, reflecting off the polished marble, I felt the familiar prickle of apprehension, a sensation I hadn't truly felt since those moments before deployment. This wasn't about impressing him. It was about protecting Sophia from his inevitable crushing judgment, from the casual cruelty he could inflict with a single dismissive glance. I wasn't ashamed of my past, or my present, or the silent wealth I had accumulated, but I knew men like Richard Montgomery, men of superficiality, saw only the surface, the glint of gold, the shine of a luxury car, never the depth of character beneath. Sophia met me at the door, her radiant smile momentarily dispelling my apprehension, melting away the anxieties like morning dew under the rising sun. She looked stunning in a flowing crimson dress, its rich color a beacon against the stark white walls. But her intelligent eyes, as I held her hand, held a subtle hint of nervousness, a shared understanding of the evening's unspoken challenges. "You look amazing," she whispered, squeezing my hand tightly, her touch a grounding force. "Don't worry. It'll be fine. We're together." Inside, the mansion was not merely a house. It was a sprawling, multi-level monument to old money and new ambition. Crystal chandeliers, sparkling like captured galaxies, dripped from impossibly vaulted ceilings. Original art by masters, both classic and contemporary, adorned every meticulously curated wall, and the intoxicating, complex scent of expensive cigars, fine leather, and gourmet cooking hung in the air, a potent, almost overwhelming perfume of wealth. Sophia's mother, Eleanor, a woman with a perpetually anxious smile, her eyes darting nervously around the room as if seeking approval, greeted me warmly, her kindness a stark, refreshing contrast to her husband's intimidating, almost predatory presence. Her younger brother, Michael, a perpetually bored junior at an Ivy League school, offered a polite but conspicuously detached handshake, his gaze quickly flitting back to his expensive smartphone, his world clearly contained within its glowing screen. Then came Richard. He was a truly formidable presence, even in his own home, the undisputed king of his castle. Tall, impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit that must have cost more than my first car, with a stern, unyielding gaze that seemed to pierce through layers of polite facade. His handshake was firm, almost crushing, his grip a silent assertion of dominance, his eyes dissecting me with an unnerving, almost clinical intensity, sizing me up, evaluating my worth. "Chris, is it?" he boomed, his voice resonating in the cavernous foyer, bouncing off the marble floors. "Sophia has told us much about you. A military man," she says. "Interesting." His tone, however, suggested anything but interest, a dismissive inflection that carried the weight of unspoken judgment. The dinner was a meticulously orchestrated affair, every detail precisely planned, designed, I suspected, not just to impress, but perhaps subtly to intimidate. Course after course of exquisitely prepared gourmet food, each dish a work of culinary art, was served by impeccably uniformed staff. Expensive wine flowed generously into sparkling crystal glasses. The delicate sound of fine china clinking against sterling silver flatware was a constant, almost hypnotic background. The conversation, meticulously steered by Richard, revolved almost exclusively around business deals of monumental scale, The thrilling fluctuations of the stock market, the latest acquisitions, and the extravagant summer plans of their impossibly wealthy friends, private jets to the Hamptons, yachts cruising the Mediterranean, exclusive art auctions in London. I listened intently, offered brief, polite, non-committal answers when directly addressed, but mostly observed, absorbing the intricate dynamics of this gilded cage. Richard, especially, dominated the conversation, his voice booming with self-importance, regaling us with endless tales of his latest triumphs, his shrewd investments, his unparalleled financial acumen, his unmatched prowess in the cutthroat world of real estate. He barely acknowledged my presence, speaking mostly to Sophia, occasionally to Eleanor, who merely nodded along with a fixed, almost brittle smile, her eyes often fluttering towards her husband for approval. Then, inevitably, like a predator finally cornering its prey, the conversation turned directly to me. "So, Chris," Richard began, spearing a perfectly seared piece of foie gras with a flourish, his eyes narrowing slightly, a predatory glint appearing. "Sophia tells me you're a consultant for a medical supplies company. Fascinating. What exactly does a consultant do besides consult?" His tone was laced with thinly veiled condescension, an audible sneer. He made the word consultant sound like a euphemism for unemployed. "I primarily advise on logistics and supply chain optimization for small to medium-sized businesses, particularly those with complex international operations," I replied calmly, my voice even, my gaze steady, meeting his without flinching. My background in military logistics provided me with a unique perspective on efficiency, resource management, and risk mitigation in high-pressure environments. I was careful not to reveal too much, to keep my cards close to my chest. Richard chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound that conveyed utter contempt. "Logistics, you say? Rather niche? Wouldn't you agree?" "Sophia, darling, you know how incredibly important stability is. And frankly, a consultant's income can be notoriously unpredictable. Wouldn't you agree, Eleanor?" Eleanor merely offered a weak, almost pained, apologetic smile, a silent plea for me to endure this humiliation. Richard then turned back to me, his gaze sweeping over my modest, though well-maintained, suit, then lingering pointedly on my bare left wrist. "I don't wear a watch," preferring simplicity, before flicking back to my eyes, a silent, damning judgment of my perceived lack of affluence. "My girl deserves the absolute best, Chris. A man who can not only provide for her, but secure her future with undeniable financial might. Someone who can offer the kind of life she's accustomed to, the life she unequivocally deserves. You understand, of course." I felt a slow, dangerous burn in my gut, a familiar tightening that used to precede the terrifying chaos of a firefight, a primal urge to react. But years of combat, of facing down far greater threats, had ingrained in me the invaluable lesson of composure under pressure, the strategic advantage of a calm mind amidst a storm. This was a battle of wills, of perceived status versus intrinsic worth, and I wasn't about to lose it by resorting to anger, which he would interpret as weakness. "Mr. Montgomery," I said, my voice steady, betraying no hint of the anger simmering beneath the surface, "I assure you, Sophia's future is something I take very seriously, more seriously than anything. And I believe in building that future on a foundation of respect, genuine understanding, and shared values, not just material wealth or the size of a bank account." Richard laughed outright, a booming, mirthless sound that echoed through the opulent dining room, mocking my words, reducing my principles to a joke. "Respect is earned, Chris, by what a man accomplishes, by what he has in tangible assets, in demonstrated power. And frankly, from what Sophia tells me, a military sergeant's salary, even a consultant's modest fee, doesn't exactly scream accomplishment in my world. My accountant, Mr. Davies, handles more money in a single week than you probably see in an entire year, perhaps even 5 years." He paused, taking a slow, deliberate sip of his incredibly expensive Cabernet, savoring the moment of my supposed humiliation. "Don't misunderstand. I appreciate your service to our country. But civilian life, young man, is a different battlefield entirely. One where capital is undeniably king, where financial leverage determines who truly wins. And from where I stand, you seem rather under-equipped for this particular war. The insult hung in the air, thick and palpable, a heavy, suffocating blanket of contempt. Sophia's beautiful face was flushed with a painful embarrassment and a growing fury. Eleanor wrung her hands nervously under the table, her perpetual smile straining at the edges. Michael, for the first time that evening, finally looked up from his phone, a flicker of genuine discomfort, perhaps even shame in his eyes. "Dad!" Sophia interjected, her voice sharp with indignation, a valiant attempt to shield me from his cruelty. "That's enough! Chris's worth isn't measured by his bank account or his job title. It's measured by his character, isn't it?" Richard challenged, turning his cold, assessing gaze on his daughter, his eyes unyielding. "It certainly is in my world. And that's the world you've grown up in, Sophia. A world where financial stability dictates everything, where a man's net worth is his true value. I want the best for you, always. Someone who can provide the lavish life you're accustomed to, the life you unequivocally deserve. Someone who fits into our world, not someone who drags you down from it." He then looked back at me, his eyes full of a chilling, absolute condescension. "A man like you, Chris, a former sergeant, working as a freelance consultant, simply isn't in Sophia's league. Perhaps you should reconsider this engagement. You're out of your depth. You're simply not good enough for my daughter, not financially, not socially." My jaw tightened, the muscles clenching in a furious protest. My hands, resting on my lap, clenched into fists so tight my knuckles turned white, but I kept my face impassive, my breathing even. Years of military discipline, of facing down far greater physical threats, of enduring unimaginable psychological pressure, kept my composure firmly intact. This was a calculated psychological battle, a skirmish of wills and perceived status, and I wasn't about to lose it by resorting to anger, which he would, predictably, misinterpret as weakness or desperation. "Mr. Montgomery," I said, my voice dangerously calm, the quiet intensity of it cutting through the remnants of his booming laughter. "I believe Sophia is fully capable of choosing who she loves, and her choices, I assure you, are not dictated by financial spreadsheets or the opinions of others. And as for my league, perhaps you'd be truly surprised by who truly plays in it, and the kind of power that operates quietly beneath the radar of your world." Richard scoffed, clearly missing the subtle, almost imperceptible warning in my tone, dismissing it as the bluster of a man outmatched. Surprised? I doubt it, young man. I've been in this game too long, seen too much. I know the players, the real players, and you're not one of them. He then, with a dismissive wave of his hand, steered the conversation back to his own colossal business deals, his latest acquisitions, his future plans, effectively dismissing me entirely as if I were a piece of furniture, an inconveniently placed prop in his grand narrative. For the remainder of the excruciatingly long evening, I was virtually invisible, a quiet observer of their opulent charade, the lingering sting of his cruel words a bitter taste in my mouth, a fuel for the quiet fire of my resolve. The evening finally ended with polite but noticeably strained goodbyes. Sophia walked me to my car, her radiant smile gone, replaced by a distraught, tear-streaked face. "I am so sorry, Chris," she whispered, clinging to me, her arms wrapped tightly around my waist. "He was absolutely awful, disgusting. I don't know what to say. I'm so humiliated." "It's all right, Soph," I murmured, stroking her hair, my own anger softening at her pain. "I expected as much, perhaps even worse. He's a man of his time, driven by very specific, very narrow values. Just confirm one thing for me. Are you still sure about us? Are you absolutely sure you can deal with this side of him, this constant judgment, this relentless pressure?" She pulled back, her eyes, though still tear-filled, flashing with a fierce, unwavering defiance, a reflection of the strength I so admired in her, more sure than ever, Chris. "His opinion, his money, his status, none of it changes how I feel about you, ever. He can say whatever he wants, but he can't change the truth. You're the kindest, most honorable, most incredible man I've ever met. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Chris, and I won't let him or anyone else come between us." Her unwavering conviction, her fierce loyalty, was my unshakable anchor in the turbulent seas of his contempt. I smiled, a genuine smile this time, a quiet sense of triumph bubbling within me. Then don't worry, my love, we'll handle him. He just doesn't know who he's truly dealing with yet, but he will. The next few weeks were a delicate dance, a tense psychological game. Richard, true to his nature, intensified his efforts to subtly undermine our burgeoning relationship. He constantly sent Sophia articles about wealthy bachelors from prominent families, casually inviting her to exclusive, high society events where I was conspicuously, almost deliberately, uninvited. He even suggested through Eleanor, with an air of faux concern, that I consider a more stable career in traditional finance, perhaps even hinting he could pull strings at a major investment bank, a thinly veiled offer of a gilded cage. Sophia, however, stood firm, her love for me unwavering, her resolve unbreakable. She became my fierce, articulate advocate, challenging her father directly, refusing to entertain his thinly veiled criticisms or his condescending suggestions. This, in turn, only fueled his irritation, his frustration mounting with each failed attempt to break us apart. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the Montgomery family, Richard's own colossal commercial real estate empire, which he had built with such ruthless efficiency, was facing a silent, insidious crisis. The market had taken an unexpected, brutal downturn, a swift, unforeseen shift that caught many off guard. Several of his large, highly leveraged, risky investments in speculative downtown developments were teetering precariously on the brink of collapse, threatening to drag his entire empire into the abyss. Banks, sensing the shift in the economic winds, were tightening credit, their once generous lines of credit now abruptly inaccessible. He desperately needed a substantial cash infusion, quickly, a life raft in a rapidly sinking ocean, to avert absolute financial disaster. For months, he had been frantically courting a mysterious, anonymous investor, a reclusive individual whose reputation for shrewd, highly profitable investments in other distressed assets, accumulating a formidable war chest of liquid capital, had made them a legendary, almost mythical, figure in the financial underworld. This investor, known only through their legal proxy, a no-nonsense, highly secretive corporate law firm renowned for their discretion, had shown significant interest in Montgomery Enterprises. The terms proposed were incredibly strict, the due diligence process exhaustive, almost invasive. But the colossal amount of capital offered was precisely what Richard needed to stay afloat, to keep his head above water. He had no idea who this financial savior was, only that they demanded absolute anonymity and unparalleled discretion. He was so desperate, so consumed by the impending doom, that he genuinely didn't care about their identity, only their money. One crisp Tuesday morning, as I was working from my modest but technologically advanced home office, meticulously analyzing market trends for my latest biomedical venture, my phone rang. It was Sophia. Her voice, usually calm and composed, was laced with a mix of raw excitement and utter bewilderment. "Chris, you won't believe it. Dad's accountant, Mr. Davies, just called. He wants to meet you. Today. He said it's urgent about Montgomery Enterprises and a significant investment opportunity. He even mentioned my name specifically, which is highly unusual. What's going on?" A slow, knowing smile, the kind that held a secret satisfaction, spread across my face. It was time. I had known this day would come, had meticulously planned this moment, not out of malice or petty revenge, but out of a calculated necessity to level the playing field, to make Richard Montgomery see beyond his narrow, suffocating, materialist worldview. My initial investments in his company several years ago had been purely opportunistic, seeing immense, undervalued potential where others saw only declining returns. But as my relationship with Sophia deepened, as I fell irrevocably in love with her, and especially as I became formally engaged to her, a new, far more profound layer was added to my strategic investment, a quiet, undeniable demonstration of my true worth, a worth that no amount of condescension, no amount of disdain could possibly ignore or diminish. "Tell Mr. Davies I'd be happy to meet him," I told Sophia, my voice calm, almost detached. "Suggest we meet at his office. This afternoon, say 2 o'clock. And Sophia, try not to worry. Everything is precisely as it should be." The meeting with Mr. Davies was a masterclass, in professional tension, a finely choreographed dance of unspoken power dynamics. He was a small, nervous man, his thinning hair perpetually disheveled, his glasses perched precariously on his nose, his brow perpetually furrowed with the weight of financial anxieties. He greeted me with a stiff, almost trembling formal handshake, his eyes darting nervously, as if he expected a sudden, unpleasant surprise. He then, with a palpable tremor in his voice, launched into a detailed, increasingly agitated explanation of Montgomery Enterprises' dire financial situation, their overwhelming debt, their precarious cash flow, and their desperate, almost existential, need for an anonymous capital injection. He spoke of the strict demands of the mysterious investor, their unwavering resolve, their non-negotiable terms. And this investor, Mr. Davies stammered, adjusting his tie nervously, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and terror, they've insisted on complete, absolute anonymity. Their legal firm, LexCorp Global Partners, one of the most secretive and powerful in the world, mind you, has been extremely tight-lipped, a veritable fortress of silence. But today, just an hour ago, they called. They said the investor wished, for the first time, to reveal his identity. To you, specifically, Mr. Vance, and that you were to bring an unsigned, critical document to this very meeting. He slid a thick, imposing folder across the polished desk, its contents feeling weighty, almost ominous. It was a comprehensive, ironclad agreement for the full acquisition of a controlling stake in Montgomery Enterprises, should Richard default on the highly demanding terms of the loan. The anonymous investor was not just offering a lifeline. They were buying an option for total, undeniable control, a silent, powerful sword of Damocles hanging over Richard's head. I opened the folder, scanned the dense legal clauses, the intricate financial jargon, my expression utterly unreadable, every trace of emotion carefully masked. "And what precisely is the nature of this document, Mr. Davies?" I asked, my voice calm, almost deceptively casual, like the still surface of a deep, dark lake. Mr. Davies swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "It's a contingency agreement, Mr. Vance. A very serious one. If the primary loan terms aren't met to the investor's exact specifications, and on time, the investor has the undeniable, legally binding option to fully acquire the company. Every asset, every share. The legal firm specifically stated that the investor would personally present this document to you for your personal signature, and that, and only that, would be the final, irreversible step for the deal to go through, releasing the funds." I nodded slowly, pushing the folder back across the desk to him, my gaze unwavering. "I see. And the identity of this exceptionally mysterious investor, Mr. Davies? Surely, after such a revelation to me, you must be privy to it now?" Mr. Davies looked around nervously, his eyes darting to the closed office door, as if expecting a hidden camera, or perhaps Richard Montgomery himself to burst in. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential, almost terrified whisper. "The legal firm, LexCorp Global Partners, instructed me, just minutes ago, to tell you that the investor's name is Chris Vance." A profound, almost deafening silence descended upon the meticulously organized room, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. Mr. Davies blinked, then blinked again, his eyes widening in a slow, dawning, utterly bewildered disbelief. He stared at me, then at the folder containing the acquisition agreement, then back at me, his gaze scanning my simple, unassuming attire, then back to the formidable legal document. The realization, the horrifying, undeniable truth, slowly, painfully spread across his face, turning it ashen, then flushing it crimson with a mix of shock and utter, incomprehensible bewilderment. "Mr. Vance, you are the anonymous investor? But that's utterly impossible. You're Sophia's fiancé, the freelance consultant, the former sergeant. This simply cannot be." His voice trailed off, a strangled gasp, a mix of pure shock and genuine terror. I offered him a faint knowing smile a subtle curve of my lips that held years of silent observation and strategic planning. Indeed, Mr. Davies, it appears the mystery has been definitively solved. The poor consultant you heard about. Now, about those terms you were so anxious about, the phone call Mr. Davies made to Richard Montgomery must have been legendary, a scream of desperation heard across the city. I could hear Richard's booming voice, even through the thick soundproofed walls of Mr. Warg, Davies' private office, first filled with incredulity, then escalating to an enraged, frustrated roar, then finally, a slow, dawning, chilling horror as the truth, undeniable and devastating, sank in. Mr. Davies emerged from his private sanctuary moments later, looking utterly shell-shocked, his tie askew, his hair even more disheveled, as if he had just survived a tornado. Mr. Montgomery wishes to see you immediately, Mr. Vance, he stammered, his voice still visibly shaking, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and reluctant awe. At the mansion. He said, "It's urgent, extremely urgent." He sounded very upset. I arrived at the Montgomery estate for the second time that week. This time, not with apprehension or a knot of anxiety, but with a quiet, almost serene sense of control, a profound inner calm that years of facing down danger had instilled in me. Richard met me in his cavernous study, a room designed specifically to impress and intimidate, filled with imposing dark wood furniture, leather-bound books, and trophies of his financial conquests. He was pacing frantically, like a caged tiger, his face a horrifying mask of disbelief, raw fury, and dawning terror. His usually slicked-back hair was disheveled, falling haphazardly across his forehead, a sign of his utter disarray. "Chris, what in God's name is the meaning of this? Davies just called. He says it's you. The anonymous investor? You? A sergeant? A freelance consultant?" His voice was a strangled roar, a mixture of uncomprehending outrage and genuine palpable terror. He looked utterly unhinged, teetering on the edge of a breakdown. "This is some kind of elaborate joke, isn't it? A malicious scam. You didn't buy into my company. You, who barely earns enough to pay for his car, much less an empire like mine." I leaned casually against the heavy oak doorframe, my arms crossed over my chest, watching him with a calm, almost detached interest. "It's no joke, Mr. Montgomery. Every word Mr. Davies told you is the unvarnished truth. The funds were acquired through careful, long-term investment of my military earnings and subsequent strategic ventures in the tech and biotech sectors. The initial investment in your company, made over a year ago, was purely business, seeing an undervalued asset ripe for an injection of capital. But as I got to know your family, and especially as I became engaged to Sophia, I realized this investment could serve a crucial dual purpose beyond mere profit." Richard stopped pacing abruptly, staring at me, his eyes wide, disbelief warring violently with the undeniable, horrifying truth that Mr. Davies had just confirmed moments ago. He looked utterly bewildered, as if the very foundations of his world had been ripped out from under him. He sank slowly into his imposing, high-backed leather armchair, looking suddenly older, smaller, utterly defeated, the formidable titan reduced to a mere mortal. "A dual purpose?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible above the frantic pounding of his own heart. "What are you talking about?" "A purpose of demonstrating true worth, Mr. Montgomery," I replied, my voice soft but firm, each word landing with the precision of a surgical strike. "You judge me, not by my character, my unwavering love for your daughter, my integrity, or my capabilities, but solely by my perceived income. You call me poor, under-equipped, out of Sophia's league. You publicly humiliated me at your own dinner table. You tried, relentlessly, to manipulate your own daughter into leaving me, based on the utterly false assumption that material wealth is the sole measure of a man. Well, here I am, the poor consultant, the former sergeant, who now holds the controlling interest in your company, effectively your financial lifeline, your silent partner in a very precarious dance. The very person you dismissed as inconsequential holds your future in their hands." His face, still ashen, went even paler, He looked utterly, completely defeated, the imposing, arrogant facade crumbling before my eyes, revealing the fragile, terrified man beneath. He stared at me, his mouth agape, unable to utter a single word. You did this. To teach me a lesson? He finally managed to whisper, his voice raw, laced with disbelief and dawning shame. Partially, I admitted, my voice losing some of its previous edge, softening with a deliberate inflection, and partially to protect Sophia. I wanted to ensure that when I married her, it wouldn't be under the crushing shadow of your contempt or your constant, insidious attempts to break us apart, to undermine our love. I wanted you to see me, truly see me, for who I am, for the man I have become, and for what I am truly capable of, beyond your superficial judgments and your narrow, materialistic worldview. I then presented him with the unsigned contingency agreement, the powerful document Mr. Davies had given me. This document, Mr. Montgomery, allows me to take full, undeniable control of Montgomery Enterprises if your company continues to falter, or if you ever again attempt to interfere with my relationship with Sophia or disrespect my family. I have no desire to see your business or your legacy fail, but I will not, under any circumstances, tolerate disrespect or attempts to undermine my family or my peace. He stared at the formidable document, its clauses suddenly seeming to mock his past arrogance, then back at me, his gaze lingering, searching. The color slowly, painfully returned to his face, but his previous, unshakable arrogance was utterly gone, replaced by a stunned, profound humility, a look I had never expected to see on his proud face. He was trapped, utterly dependent on the man he had so casually scorned, the man he had deemed beneath him. "Chris," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper, a stark, almost shocking contrast to his usual booming, authoritative tone. I was wrong, terribly, unforgivably wrong. I judged you unfairly. I was blinded by my own misguided values, my own arrogance, my own fears. I apologize deeply for everything I said, everything I implied, every single insult. Sophia, she deserves a man like you, a man of integrity, of quiet strength, of profound loyalty, not just money. My God, I've been a monumental fool, a blind, arrogant fool. The apology felt genuine, unforced by coercion or immediate threat, but born from a profound, undeniable moment of self-realization, a shattering of his carefully constructed reality. It was a raw, vulnerable admission from a man who prided himself on never being wrong, never showing weakness, never backing down. This was the moment of reckoning I had painstakingly engineered, not to achieve a petty, temporary humiliation, but to open his eyes, to force him to see beyond his own limited perception. "What do you want, Chris?" he asked, his voice still hoarse, filled with a desperate resignation. "Do you want to run the company? Do you want me out? Just tell me. It's yours." I shook my head slowly. "No, Mr. Montgomery, I don't want to run your company. I want your respect, not your empire. I want you to treat Sophia and me and our future family with the dignity and consideration we deserve. I want you to understand, truly understand, that true strength isn't measured by how much wealth you accumulate or by how much power you wield over others, but by how you treat those who seemingly have less, those who are not in a position to benefit you. And I want you to unequivocally recognize that Sophia chose me not for my perceived wealth or lack thereof, but for my character, for the man I am, for the love we share." I paused, then added, my voice firm, "The investment stands. The terms remain unchanged, but I'll continue to be a silent partner as before. Your accountant, Mr. Davies, will handle the specifics. Just remember this conversation, always. Let it be a constant reminder of what truly matters." Over the next 6 months, the transformation of Richard Montgomery was nothing short of remarkable, almost miraculous. He became a humbled man, still driven, still ambitious, but with a profound, newfound respect for others, a genuine empathy that had previously been utterly absent. He sought my advice on intricate business matters, listening intently, no longer dismissive, no longer assuming his own superior knowledge. He treated Sophia and me with a genuine warmth, an unfamiliar tenderness entering his eyes when he spoke to us, a proud glint replacing his old calculating stare. He often, almost habitually, brought up our initial disastrous dinner, shaking his head and chuckling self-deprecatingly, confessing his folly, his past arrogance. He learned to appreciate Sophia's empathetic nature, her strong, unwavering values, her fierce independence. Even Michael, his son, seemed to become more grounded, more focused on academic pursuits that truly interested him rather than superficial ambitions, perhaps seeing the undeniable folly of his father's previous materialism and realizing there was more to life than wealth alone. 6 months later, Sophia and I were married in a ceremony that perfectly reflected our values, a beautiful blend of our two worlds, now harmoniously united. It was held not in a grand imposing church or a lavish country club, but in a beautiful botanical garden, lush with vibrant foliage and fragrant blooms, a place of natural beauty and quiet serenity. My old Special Forces buddies, some with visible scars from our tours, their faces etched with the wisdom of shared sacrifice, stood proudly alongside Sophia's childhood friends, all united in celebrating our love. Veteran-owned businesses provided the delicious catering, a feast of comfort food and gourmet delights, and the vibrant, tastefully arranged flowers, a small but meaningful testament to the community that had quietly supported me, always. And Richard Montgomery, with genuine pride in his eyes and a profound, newfound respect for the man waiting at the altar, walked his radiant daughter down the aisle, his smile warm, his embrace sincere. His handshake with me was firm, respectful, filled with a quiet, powerful acknowledgement of my undeniable worth, a silent apology and a promise of a new beginning. In his wedding speech, Richard, usually so verbose, so prone to self-aggrandizement and grand pronouncements, was uncharacteristically brief and remarkably heartfelt. His voice, usually so booming, was tinged with a genuine humility that surprised everyone in attendance. "I thought I was merely gaining a son-in-law," he said, his voice cracking slightly with emotion, his eyes misting over. "Instead, I gained a son and learned the most profound lesson of my life, what it truly means to be a man worth respecting." Chris taught me that true strength isn't measured by how much money you have in your bank account or by how you treat those who can directly help you, but by how you respond when someone, especially someone as arrogant as I once was, tries to diminish your worth, to question your value. He paused, taking a moment to compose himself. I owe him a profound debt, not of money, which he clearly doesn't need, but of gratitude, for opening my eyes, for showing me a different path. In the audience, Miguel Santos, Linda Chun, Robert Kim, and dozens of other veterans, many of them silent investors in my own ventures, raised their glasses, their faces etched with pride, to toast not just a marriage, but the kind of man who never forgot where he came from, or the people who stood beside him along the way, who understood that true power lay not in accumulation, but in quiet dignity. The sergeant's salary, as it turned out, had been more than enough all along. My life with Sophia is now filled with a quiet, profound joy, a sense of deep contentment that surpasses any material possession. We live in a comfortable, but not ostentatious, home, preferring experiences and genuine connection over lavish displays of wealth. My investments continue to grow, quietly funding ventures that seek to make a real, tangible difference in the world, in areas like sustainable energy and medical breakthroughs, true innovations that impact lives. I still enjoy my freelance consulting work, advising bright startups and helping small businesses scale, finding immense satisfaction in building and supporting others, and sharing the knowledge I've gained. Richard Montgomery has transformed into a trusted advisor and, more importantly, a true friend, his wisdom now tempered with humility. We often play golf, and he's remarkably humble now, always listening more than talking, always eager to learn. I've learned that true power isn't about control or vast wealth, but about the quiet confidence of knowing your own intrinsic value, regardless of how others perceive you. Dignity is never for sale. It's an unshakable quality you embody, a strength that allows you to stand firm, unwavering, even when others try desperately to diminish you. My remarkable journey from the dusty, chaotic battlefields of Afghanistan to the gleaming, cutthroat boardrooms of corporate America taught me that the greatest victories are often won not with brute force or aggressive tactics, but with patience, meticulous strategy, and an unshakable belief in one's own integrity, in the truth of who you are. And sometimes, the most satisfying, most profound revenge against people who try to break you down is simply allowing their own arrogance and ignorance to lead them to a lesson they desperately needed to learn, and then watching them, through that hard-won realization, become better, more humane, more understanding people for it. Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship or business opportunity that came with unacceptable conditions where your worth was questioned or your dignity compromised? How did you handle it? Did you find a way to make them see your true value? Share your experiences, your moments of quiet triumph in the comments below. If this story resonated deeply with you, if it helped you recognize your own inherent worth, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself, reclaiming your dignity in both personal and professional situations, and transforming adversity into profound, unexpected triumph. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember always, your dignity, your true worth is never, ever for sale.